It's Buster's 130th birthday, and we are going to be looking at what is pretty arguably his greatest independent film, The General. So we have Trains! Trains! This is probably, if nothing else of Buster's independent work survived, except for this, we'd still know he was a genius, because this is the kind of thing that should have been a passion project. But because this is Buster, this was one of 2 films he put out in that year. The other film was The Battling Butler, which is another favourite of mine, which I'll do another year. But for a lot of other people, this would be like a 10-year project. I had to scrape together the money. No, this was, let's do a movie about trains, which really gives you an insight into the genius that was Buster Keaton as a filmmaker. Sadly, it's also because of the cost and because of it not making the kind of money that his backers wanted, was one of the many contributing factors that led Buster to end up at MGM. Now, The General is my favourite Buster Keaton film. It is my comfort film. So, what makes The General great? Let's start with Johnny Gray himself, Buster's character. So, Buster's independent feature films, he doesn't play the Buster of the shorts. I think the only one where you could say he does that is 3 Ages, which is essentially 3 shorts stuck together. But Johnny Gray is an independent character to any of the other features. Johnny Gray is not Alfred Butler. Johnny Gray is not Willie McKay. He is a very particular character. And if I were to describe Johnny Gray to someone, he is persistent, he is dogged, and he is blinkered. And that is probably the major characteristic that informs the entire plot of this, because Johnny Gray's blinkeredness, the fact that he sees the world along those 2 tracks that the train runs along, is part of the reason why he ends up alone on the Texas, why he ends up very stuck, why he doesn't explain things. He is not someone who looks outside of things. He focuses on his goal and he pursues it, and he doesn't think laterally. And that's where the comedy comes from. And we see this time and time and time again. We see it with the enlistment, attempting to do this. We see it all through The Pursuit. He is as tied to the tracks and tied to his particular way of thinking as The General is tied to its tracks and cannot move out of that. And it makes sense to have a protagonist who is so literal and dogged, because you have a very limited mobility with the trains. I mean, they're not going to overtake each other. It's a pursuit film both ways. It's part of what makes it so satisfying to watch, because once everything gets moving, you have the General being stolen, pursued by the Johnny Gray and the Texas, and then you have the General being taken back, pursued by the Texas and the Union Army traveling in the other direction. So it feels almost like clockwork in some respects. And I find that really, really soothing. It's strangely enough, I find it a deeply soothing way for the film to be structured. So let's go through the mirror images of this train chase. So our first one is at the opening, we have the Union soldiers, the Union spies, really, stealing the general. They take out the pin that links the forward cars and the engine to the passenger cars. And then, before anyone notices, they're on, and they've got Johnny Gray's girlfriend, they've got Annabelle, and the train is off before anyone notices what is happening. Now, again, this time we remove the pin because Annabelle is in the sack, and again she ends up in the baggage cart. Why? Because he's got to get her on there somehow. And then this one's more difficult because it is much busier, but it's the same thing. Steal the train, incapacitate the driver, get rid of people, and you're off. Very quick, very clean. No shooting, mind you, but it's just surprise, and they're off. Next up, we are sabotaging the telegraph lines, and we get a mirror image. The Union spies wrecking the telegraph lines. Of course, there's more of them. And then, again, Johnny Gray at the other end of the film, also taking down the telegraph wires. But, of course, it's Buster, so he's going to do it in a very particular Buster manner. But he's also putting it in as an obstacle. He has faced all these obstacles, chasing the general. Now, having got the general back, he knows to put obstacles back in. So what we get is the telegraph wire coming down because it cuts communication, and also making sure that pole is on the tracks because he knows how hard it was to get those poles and all those obstacles off the tracks. So he waits, and then boom. The next obstacle is water. Obviously, you need to fuel and water these engines, so having to stop, picking up wood, putting on water. And now Johnny Gray has an engine. He doesn't have anyone else, but they don't know that. They don't know it's one man alone. That takes quite a long time. So in their rush, they do leave the water running deliberately. Like, okay, well, we're going to make this a problem. Make this a problem for somebody else. And so we have another one of those moments where Johnny Gray is kind of oblivious, and he looks, is it raining? Why did I get wet? Because, of course, the crew said, soak Buster and you'll have a hit. So Buster does get soaked quite a bit. And here we have the water again, where Buster and Marion managed to get themselves soaked, trying to refuel that. You would think, given the after the messing about with water tanks and breaking his neck, he would have been wary of them, but no, we keep doing that. And again, startled by the oncoming pursuers, we leave that to, again, make everybody wet without but they know why they're wet. They're not thinking they got rained on. So we've had power lines down, we've had water, we still have a couple more to go. The next one is the leaving stuff on the tracks, and both the Union and Johnny Gray break the back out of the boxcars and start throwing things onto the track. Though the Union uses the railway ties that give us that wonderful stunt that we'll talk about in a bit, whereas Johnny Gray is throwing all the supplies out onto the tracks. But for all of this, I would not want you to think, if you haven't seen The General, that it's just a one-to-one. There are a couple of things that the Union soldiers do that Johnny Gray doesn't do, and there are some things that Johnny Gray does that the Union soldiers don't do, because it would be boring if it was just a one-to-one. The next thing we get is damaging the rails and switching the points. I think I've got these a little bit out of order, but the Union spies damage the rails and they switch the points. Johnny Gray damages the rails and switches the points at the same time. He doesn't have loads of people with him. He has to use the engine, so he yanks out the rail with the engine to damage the points. Finally, the last form of sabotage that we get is the setting fire, setting the boxcar on fire and leaving it in the covered bridge. So obviously this is a really dangerous thing to happen. You're deliberately obscuring the bridge. You're deliberately allowing this engine to go into it. This is the point. This is incredibly dangerous. And surprised me when I first saw it, because it was like, oh, is that what fire and smoke look like on nitrate film? Wow. It almost looked fake when I saw it the first time. But so we've got fire being used to obscure, fire being used and smoke being used to slow down your pursuer. This gets mirrored, obviously, in the reverse. But in the reverse, it is part of the setup to not just a falling in the water tank gag, but as setup for what was the most expensive shot in all of silent movie history. So, to be honest, that was probably one of the nails in Buster's independent film career's coffin, was that extraordinarily expensive shot. But, and we will look at it because I can't talk about The General without that. But it really was probably one of those things that was we have problems with your vision, Buster. Of course, one of the interesting things in this film is the relationship between Johnny and Annabelle. They work as a team, which does make getting the General back behind their own lines easier in some ways, but they also are obstacles to one another. They're very antagonistic lovers, which is an interesting sort of dynamic to have, and it gives Mary and Matt quite a bit to actually do. Not a lot of leading ladies in Buster's films have a lot to do, but Marion Mack is more than just the damsel in distress. She isn't just the thing to be rescued, because the thing to be rescued is not Annabelle. Johnny has no idea that Annabelle is on the train, that on the General. He doesn't know that until he's in the under the table and sees her through the through the hole in the tablecloth. He is trying to get the general back. As far as he is concerned, she dumped him a year ago, and he's not really happy about it. But she dumped him because he wouldn't be a soldier. And then when he sees her, of course, he's not going to leave her there. But it is an interesting sort of relationship between the two of them, because also Annabelle, even after everything that they've been through together, him rescuing her, all of that, still seems to be caught up on that uniform, on him being in the army. And it's an interesting dynamic. You also, like, honestly, I don't think she's worth it. He did all that, and you're still going to get him, But that's another story. You see how she goes from being strangely disinterested in him to being, oh, look, he's a soldier. He's a soldier. It's kind of a little bit off with her. I can't say that I truly like her. But you also see when she's on the train, how you get an idea of what their domestic situation is going to be like. It's going to be tempestuous. And the strangle kiss is Marion Mack's joke. So don't get angry at Buster for that. That was her idea. Though, to give Annabelle her due, she does come up with one of the unique snares of their escape. While Johnny is fetching wood somewhat inefficiently, Annabelle is tying the rope that was left from pulling the telegraph wires down to trees, and actually snaring up the Texas as it comes through and pinning people down, and they have to stop, and it buys them some time. So Annabelle is a more complicated character than many of the others in even Buster's films. And I don't think we would enjoy it, even if I do find her a bit frustrating, like, what more do you want the man to do? She's not one-dimensional. One of the things that struck me when I first saw The General was the extraordinary beauty of the cinematography. It is something I think we don't think about when it comes to someone like Buster Keaton, where we're looking at the stunts, we're looking at the gags. But then you look at something like this with the Union and the Confederate armies passing behind the train, and just think, those are hand crank cameras. The way this was shot was by putting the camera on a flatbed truck or another railway car that was running parallel, and then filming that. You have no microphones, you have no earpiece, and you get such a beautiful shot. It's technically so difficult. And then you get this. You had one go at this. This was going in the river once, and it wasn't coming out, and it's brilliant. You could have done it with a model, but you wouldn't have the horses, you wouldn't have the movement, you wouldn't have the reality of it. We don't, I think, talk enough about Buster as a compositor of images and as an editor, because this is, all of Buster's stuff is beautifully edited. It is cut together so well and with such precision. It's part of the reason why I enjoy chopping these things apart, is because they're so easy to cut apart. It's not until you cut apart another filmmaker that you realize, oh boy, there is an art to editing, and Buster knows that art. The General has the single darkest ending, which is interesting because it's only a happy ending for about the next few seconds, because being forced into the army, being an officer, 1 in 5 officers were killed. Sure, he gets the general back, he gets Annabelle, but Annabelle insisting he be in the army. Here is this wave of men, this wave of obligation that's going to take him away from her for who knows how long, perhaps forever. It's very dark, very daring to do that. Of course, it's not a Buster Keaton movie without the stunts, and here are 3 of the best. Partly because they're probably the most dangerous things he did. So one of the beautiful images, but so incredibly dangerous, like unspeakably dangerous for all its beauty. This one with the cannon, after he's loaded the cannon and gets the chain caught on his, or the link caught on his foot. It's something he's used more than once, and I've talked about that more than once in another video. I think I put it in last year's birthday video if you want to have a look at that. But that's really dangerous. If he doesn't get that off his foot, he's going to get pulled off the locomotive. He scurries back and forward, back and forward, back and forward across that locomotive like it's nothing. Of course, if he falls off that thing, he's going under it and he'll get crushed to death. The number of ways he could have been crushed to death in this film is shocking. Nothing in this is akin to spectacular like the waterfall rescue, but just about every single thing he did is dangerous, and this one is one of the most dangerous. So we're going to leave it here. Happy 130th birthday, Buster. If you would like to support this channel, come across to the Black Cockie Press website, www.blackcockiepress.com.au, where you will find books and other writing services to help with your writing.